my fabulous co-host, Stephanie Lancaster. And we will take a minute to both introduce ourselves before we get into our topic today. So as you heard, our topic is about the idea of accessibility and innovation and trying to ensure both. And we actually both work in the Department of Academic Innovation at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's worldwide campus. So our worldwide campus is predominantly online. We do have some satellite campus locations, about 115 of them all over the world, but we do, in our roles, focus almost exclusively on online learning and online education. So as senior instructional designers, we do some different kinds of roles. I work very closely with our Central and South America office and their courses. I also coordinate an internship program for our instructional design department. And I'm also our Quality Matters coordinator and trainer for the APPQMR. So I work closely with Quality Matters. And then I'm supporting our College of Business team. And so I will let Stephanie introduce herself and share a little bit about her role.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Lancaster. I'm the Senior Instructional Designer for our College of Arts and Sciences. So we are an aeronautical university. However, we do have a very large College of Arts and Sciences program. I focus mainly on helping the emergency services courses, but I also work in a little bit of the math and science and technology department and also some of our behavioral and social sciences courses. On the side, though, we also have what is called our QEP, a quality enhancement plan, and we've been focusing on writing matters. So I'm a member of that. I also serve on a few other committees focusing on redesigning our overall courses and what it looks like, and then doing some research to make sure that we are really utilizing our course design to the best possible way in terms of page views and video views and using Canvas analytics to enhance that. And then I also proposed an accessibility team, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. So that's where we are now.
Yes. So we wanted to start with a disclaimer. Stephanie and I are both very passionate about accessibility, and we are passionate about innovation and education, but we are certainly not accessibility experts. So unfortunately, if you thought that we were going to have all of the answers to your accessibility problems, we are going to be sharing some problems with you actually that we're still trying to find solutions to. And so this is meant to really be kind of an interactive session. We hope that you'll share some of your pain points or challenges that you're experiencing at your own institutions. We'll share some of ours with you. But we do have some steps that we've taken at our institution. As Stephanie mentioned, she's leading a really great initiative that she's going to share as part of the presentation later on. So as far as what to expect, I mentioned a little bit that we're going to talk about some of those most pressing challenges. We have some to share with you with regards to accessibility and innovation in online education. And then hopefully you'll be able to leave able to discuss some ways to help with some of those problems. And we don't want accessibility and innovation to contradict each other. There's ways that they can both go hand in hand. And so we'll talk about our current challenges. We have an interactive activity that we hope that you'll participate in with us. We'll share out some of those ideas that we've found from that session. And then Stephanie will talk about our accessibility team at Embry-Riddle Worldwide, and we'll want to leave plenty of time in case you have any questions for us. Oh, sorry, I have some flair I forgot about. So as we all know, Quality Matters recently released their new higher education rubric. And what makes us really happy is the extra focus that they've added to accessibility and usability. And so I'm sure that we're all familiar with these specific review standards, but they focus not just on the basics. They really go beyond that in accessibility and usability. So that encompasses all learners too. It's not just somebody using a screen reader or somebody with some sort of audio or visual impairment. It's really for all students. And that idea of usability and accessibility is throughout. So text, images, course design, navigation, and multimedia. And so we've been really focusing on these specific review standards at our institution as well. And as you'll see later on, it really formed the basis of a tool that we're creating and we're using at our institution. So this is kind of where a lot of these conversations came from. So we're really glad to see Quality Matters focusing on that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot at our institution and in our trainings and communications that we're doing about accessibility is there's really kind of the floor and the ceiling with accessibility. That floor are those minimum accessibility requirements. We know by law that there are some things that we are required to do in our courses. We have to make sure that our text and our images and our multimedia are accessible. So we're including alt text for all of our images, or we're marking them as decorative. We're making sure that our text is actually text, it's not image. We're not using color to denote meaning. All of our Embry-Riddle created multimedia assets include captions and transcripts, those sorts of things. So that is really what we're considering the minimum accessibility requirements, but the ceiling is high with accessibility to create courses that are fully accessible and usable to all learners. So we're definitely well above the floor, but we're still trying to reach the ceiling with accessibility. There's a lot of things that I think that we do really well, and there's still some opportunities for us to just improve and work on them even more. But we find that sometimes that becomes a little bit of a challenge as we think about creating new and more innovative ways for our students to learn. So if you are like us, if you're instructional designers, or you are an online instructor, or you teach or work in higher ed at all, you're probably being asked to do some similar things to what we are being asked to do as instructional designers. We're constantly being asked to be innovative. As I mentioned, we're in the Department of Academic Innovation. So that's something that comes up frequently in all of our meetings. How can we be more innovative? How can we elevate our discussions, which is the next one. If you have ever taken or taught an online course, you know that sometimes discussions can be kind of old and stale. So there's a lot of really great tools that are starting to be developed out there that can allow you to elevate your discussions, but how do we make sure that's accessible? We're really trying to get away from midterms and finals and multiple choice quizzes and exams to more authentic assessments and real world learning experiences for our students. And our big theme really of the past few years has been humanizing the online experience. And so it doesn't have to be text on a page or you speaking to just somebody's name through typing. It's putting that human in the online environment and adding people's personality and their presence as students and instructors in the online environment in particular, since that's the area that we work in. And so we're being asked to do that. But again, there's challenges with it. One of the biggest challenges that we struggle with is, what do we do about student and instructor created media? We require anything that is created in our courses by our instructional design team or our multimedia services team that it has captions and transcripts. But in a live course, in a live section, if an instructor creates a video welcome announcement, or students are creating video discussion posts, or those kinds of things, how do we make sure that those are accessible? They don't automatically have perfect captions created. We do have the ability to create machine captions, but to be fully accessible, they need to be 100% accurate, and the machines are not 100% accurate yet. And they're not creating transcripts of their work to also share with their classmates or with their students in their course. And so again, we don't want to not provide that as a resource or an opportunity, but how do we make sure that that's accessible? Another component of that, as well as audio and video feedback provided by instructors in the grading area. How do we manage that in a way that's accessible for all learners? And you might have heard of the term Gen AI. I feel like we talk about it every day lately in our work. So I'm sure that you do as well. And we want to incorporate that obviously in a way that make sense in our courses for our students and in our workflow as instructional designers and for our faculty as well. But how do we make sure that all of these new Gen AI tools out there are accessible for all learners? How do we even test and verify that when the technology is constantly developing in that space? Another aspect that was really kind of eye-opening for me when it was mentioned to me in a session with our disability support team was that in an online course, for example, in our math courses, we might have them complete math quizzes and then take pictures of their handwritten work to show their work and get credit for their work. And then their instructor can give them feedback. If they made a mistake, they can point out where it was. And it was pointed out that that could potentially be an accessibility issue for students who have something like fine motor disabilities or challenges writing by hand. And so how do we ensure that they're able to show their work and demonstrate their knowledge and understanding if they don't have that ability to do that without diluting the quality and the importance of the test or the exam? Another thing is group project issues. If groups are meeting in Zoom or Teams or something, and a student has some sort of disability or impairment, that might be a challenge for them. But even more than that, maybe they have a lot of social anxiety, or maybe they have PTSD. We have actually a lot of students in the military, and we've had some students that are not able to show their face on camera for whatever reason. Maybe they're in some sort of security situation. So how do we allow for group projects that take all of that into consideration? And then another one as well, and this isn't necessarily from an accessibility side, but it's more of just being all inclusive in our courses. We have a lot of international students at the Worldwide Campus where English is not their first language and or they're not from the United States. And so how do we make sure that our language and our examples and even the tools that we use are fully accessible and inclusive to all of our learners? I know, for example, we've had some tools that are only accessible from certain countries, and then we've had students on military bases that can't use them. Or we use examples that make a lot of sense to us, but they don't make sense to somebody who isn't in the United States. I had an instructor who wanted to develop a whole course about baseball as a theme, but baseball isn't a sport that every country knows, as an example. So we had to explain the sport of baseball to be able to connect it to it. And so there's lots of challenges. This certainly isn't an exhaustive or all-encompassing list, but they are some of the challenges that we are currently facing that we haven't found easy, quick solutions to. But I'm sure that you have some of your own challenges that you're facing as well, because it can be challenging to ensure accessibility while seeking innovation. And the solution isn't just don't be innovative or don't be accessible. We have to find ways to be able to do both. So that was my long-winded introduction to our activity that we are going to ask that you participate in. We would really love for you to start to share some of your own challenges. We're assuming that you came to this session today because maybe you are looking for some answers or you're facing some similar challenges at your institution. So we have a Padlet. Stephanie just put the link in the chat. And so let me see if it'll let me open it from here. Yes, it will. So I listed the ones that I just mentioned on here, but what we're going to first ask that you do is take a few minutes and add any of your own challenges that you have. So you can add a challenge just by choosing this plus button or clicking directly on, I don't think it's going to let me do it while I do it. There we go. And so you can add a challenge here. And then if you see somebody else's challenge that you connect with, or that you were going to mention something similar about, you can just add a little heart to it. And that is kind of a, I agree, or I'm facing the same situations, kind of a commiseration heart, I guess you could say. So take a second, or a few minutes, I should say, to share your challenges. And then after you've had a couple of minutes to do that, what we would also like for you to do is just take a couple of minutes and share a solution. If you found something that works, it doesn't have to work in all situations for this problem, but maybe you're doing something that is helping to address this issue. We would love for you to share your thoughts with us there as well. So the time is 12:16. So Stephanie, you think like 4 minutes for that?
Yeah, it's 2:16, just to be clear that we're
2:16.
all we're but you know what, somewhere in the United States right now it
Right.
is 12:16. But
There
yeah,
you
so
go.
I think 4 minutes is good.
Thank you. And I don't want to call anybody out, but thank you to our first challenge participant that shared on it. And that's a really good point is, um, do we make assumptions about the kinds of broadband access that are available to our faculty and students? I mean, you could go even further. Do they have a computer? Are they taking the course on their cell phone? Or are they borrowing a different computer every time from a friend or a classmate? So how do we take that into consideration when we create um, assignments and course activities?
Sarah and I have talked about this before because we also both are instructors. And I had a student who was homeless for the first 3 months that she was in my class and she actually lived in her car. So there were a lot of things that we had to take into consideration when accepting assignments and what she could and could not access via her phone, because that was all she was working off of for an entire college course.
Yeah, and I had a similar in a situation as an instructional designer designing courses actually for Brazilian air traffic controllers. And they were all actually, we found out after the course had been designed that they were all taking it from their phone. It just wasn't something that many of them had access to, a computer. And so we really had to kind of rework the course to make it more mobile friendly. And that's something that we hadn't thought about until unfortunately after the fact, but it is something that now we're much more mindful of in our designs. So I see somebody has shared a suggestion, which is super helpful. So I think a lot of people are still typing on there, which is great. If you have no challenges, that's amazing for you. If you would like to just share with us all of your answers by adding a comment on any of the problems or challenges that have been listed here. And you can also save this link if you would like. To kind of come back to the ideas, or hopefully those in watching the recordings, if they add to it as well, you might see that this list grows as well. Oh, Stephanie, do you want to address that new one that just popped up?
Faculty fatigue is real. So just in case anybody is not able to see it, it says, as an instructional designer, I face the challenge of getting instructor buy-in with this type of self-reflection or making adjustment when not required. They are tired and don't want to implement anything new or use a new technology. We face this regularly. But we also face the opposite, where people are introduced to new tools and they want to use every new tool. So it's, both two sides of the same coin that we're facing. I think that because we are trying to be innovative, so we are trying to, to always, try and find answers, but we're actually going to address that a little bit later, even in that process of finding out if those tools are even the best possible tools that we can be using. But it is a process. Our process, um, I'm not sure if you all are familiar, but we use a templated process. So we are working on like a 4-month plan, our project cycle. And so we have some time to discuss those things and try and, get buy-in, but it is difficult. Um, but I think a lot of it has to do with student feedback, going back to what students are saying works and doesn't work, and working off of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, to Stephanie's point, I think we experience really both sides of that. There's the I want to keep doing it the way I've always done it, or that I want to use the shiny new tool. And sometimes the shiny new tool isn't accessible at all. And we have to look at that ahead of time. So we actually have a tool review process that our instructional technologists go through, and it is rigorous, and sometimes it can kind of slow down the process. But the idea is that it should be checking for those kinds of things. So before an instructor adds it into their course, we can confirm, hopefully, that it is accessible. Oh, and somebody mentioned partner with SGA to empower students to develop accessible materials for their peer learners and incentivize this with student awards. And somebody commented that they're curious about this, and I am as well. So I'm not sure if whoever posted that, if you're comfortable turning your mic on, or if you want to share it a little bit more in the chat, but we'd love a little bit more information on excuse me while I steal this amazing idea. That's why we're here, to get ideas and suggestions from each other. But I do think that that's a really great way to explain students, or to students, the value and the importance of making sure that what they're creating is accessible. How to simplify faculty workflows for captioning their content too. Yeah. And so it looks like some suggestions are coming up as well in the student instructor created media part. There are a lot of really great automatic captioning tools. A couple of them have been mentioned, but you do have to check them to be considered fully accessible. But it's definitely better to get something rather than nothing. And so if that's all that you can get your students and your instructors to do, it's certainly a start and better than not providing anything. And so to go back to the other question of, how do we get them, okay, enable the captions, but then go back and check them with the work.
I just was gonna note also under the faculty fatigue comment, there was one about the students also feeling that experience, and it's very true, especially when one instructor wants to use 3 different platforms essentially for the same course. It can be frustrating for the students to navigate and figure out where things go. So that's why I always go back to student feedback, and we utilize that. We have an update process that we utilize, so we have a chance to remedy those things pretty quickly if they come across. But that is something that you also have to take into consideration, is that it takes a lot of cognitive load for students to learn new processes. And that's also, a form of accessibility, is making sure that the cognitive awareness is there.
Right. And related to that too, there's just the, yeah, it's frustrating for students when faculty assume they have the tech skills instead of providing the guides or support. And sometimes that happens when you're using third-party tools. We can support our learning management system and our tools from our IT side, but we're not necessarily able to support that for third-party tools. And so having that extensive tool review process, I think, helps make sure that there is some sort of support provided. But I think too, that's such a good point. It's not just within course, it's course to course. There hopefully is some kind of communication or collaboration across courses so that they're not learning one tool, for example, for mind mapping. And then in another course, they're mind mapping, but they have to learn a whole new tool, even though they both have similar functionality. And so I think that that's a really great example of how, if we can communicate and collaborate across courses, maybe in a program, and choose kind of some core tools that we can fully support. And also that students then aren't relearning a new tool to do the same task from course to course, that makes a big difference too, especially if there's a cost with them. If they have to buy a tool just to use for one term, and then they have to buy a new tool for a new term, that's a usability issue, certainly, as well. And that is one of the specific review standards that we're providing vendor statements and access information for that. So it goes back to quality matters too. All right, so that link will still be available after this session. If you want to come add to it, or for those of you that are watching the recording, please feel free to add to it or look at the ideas that come up here, because we're clearly not alone in having some of these challenges, but there are some good solutions that are being developed as well. I see one more that popped up. We see issues with people developing activities inaccessibly, then relying on faculty or staff to help make them accessible after the fact, instead of learning to build accessible from the start. I don't know who posted that, but you just made such a fabulous segue into Stephanie's part of the presentation. So gold star for you as we talk about kind of what we're trying to do, because that's the whole point. The more that we can be aware of this ahead of time, it's so much easier to design with accessibility in mind from the start than to try to retroactively make something accessible. Sometimes it's not possible after the fact, and then it results in a lot of work and effort and frustration for people at the end of a development process, when if we could think about it from the beginning, it would be much better for everybody. So thank you for whoever posted that, because it's right in line with what we want to talk about.
So with that in mind, Sarah said earlier, we don't have all the answers, but we do have a few that we want to share with you, because we think it's important to share the love. So a few, last year, June of last year, I attended another conference, and at that conference was a session on an accessibility group that was formed at a very small institution, and they essentially would provide grants for courses to be redeveloped. And during that process, they would really focus on accessibility. And because the faculty at that college didn't have the best understanding of what was accessible and how to be ADA compliant. And so they formed this group, and it kind of took one member from media, one member from instructional design, and one member from their faculty development team, and created this group and said, we have made improvement in accessibility. And then they shared that at the conference. And luckily I was attending that session, and I was like, this is perfect, because we have a lot of those same parts where Sara and I work, and we focus on accessibility, but it's more of a kind of what they were talking about, where we take a course and then now we make it accessible, rather than thinking about it from the beginning and choosing tools that are accessible and choosing assets and making our assets accessible from the beginning, so that we don't have to go back and review it to make sure they are. So I was like, this would be fantastic. So I put in a proposal here, and we formed the accessibility teams, accessibility / usability, because we do also want to focus on the usability of our courses and making sure that there is multiple means of engagement and representation for our students, especially because we have such a diverse student population. So with that in mind, we created the team, and we'll kind of go into each little aspect of that, but we have several departments within our AI, the Academic Innovation Division. So the first is the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. We have 2 members from that group, and they really focus on faculty development and ensuring that the live courses that we have produced are running smoothly, and that students are finding success in those courses. So that might include consultations with faculty, but reviews as well, things like that. Then we have 4 members from instructional design and development. Sara and I are 2 of those. And then we also have another one from the College of Business and one from College of Aviation. So all 3 colleges are represented and have an equal voice in the process. And then we also have 1 member from our multimedia services department. Our courses are templated, so we create them and then they're passed down so that the instructors are all given the same course, no matter who's teaching it. However, all of the media is created by a specialized department. So that's not created by instructional design or the faculty for the most part. It's created by this special department who has, we have people who specialize in photography, in video, in media assets, various kinds, in simulation. So they're represented as well. And then finally, we also have one from our learning support and design team. And those people really focus on making sure that the live courses are running smoothly, but also that the tools that we choose are of great quality and accessible. And then also making sure that the tools that are in the courses are running smoothly, so that if there are problems for the students, they have someone to contact. So we took all 4 of these teams and we said, great, now we all have equal buy-in to how do we make our courses and any student-facing content, not even just the courses, but the tool guides that we produce, the things that come from our faculty, how do we make sure all of that is accessible? And so we created the team, and we meet very often, and we have a set of goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve. You can see them all here, but I'm going to highlight a few of them that are extremely important. So one of those is to create an organized approach. Essentially, because we are such a large division, we want to make sure that everybody has the same common goal. And so we want to make sure it's consistent and organized. And so part of our goal is to make sure that all four of our teams are talking about the same thing and sharing the same resources. And what one team is doing isn't different than another team, especially when it comes to accessibility, because it's literally the law. So we want to make sure that everybody's following the same rules, essentially. Another one is to assist and advise leadership. Sadly, none of us are in decision-making roles, but we do want to be able to provide guidance. And because we do not have one particular position that is, I would say, in charge of accessibility, that is what we have taken on, is researching it, because none of us came in as experts and none of us are experts still, but we have taken on that job of researching it and understanding QM's guidance or WCAG's guidance and Canvas's guidance, because we do use Canvas as our LMS, and utilizing those, and then to make recommendations to our leadership. And then finally, also another one to highlight is that we want to identify accessibility and usability issues on the ground. So this kind of goes back to exactly what was said before. We want to know what's happening now, but also what can we expect to come? So on the horizon, what are issues that we might be able to find resources now and provide support for people, because we're always going to try and be innovative. So what are the new tools that we're looking at? For example, we are looking at a new discussion platform right now. So how can we make sure that that's fully accessible? Does it support equations? Does it support video? Does it support captioning? So those are things that we want to look at, but also our current courses. Are they even fully accessible? The current assets that we're using, are they even? So part of it is just identifying what we're actually doing now and coming up with a streamlined process. So what we did is we got together and we said, well, what do we want to do? Because we all come from different departments. So we all have different approaches and we all have different, I'm going to say, angles that we think about it from. But our goal is common. We want to make sure that everything we produce for students is accessible and usable. And so we came up with 7 different initiatives. 3 of them would be considered short-term, 1 is medium-term, and 3 are long-term. And one of them I'm so excited we're going to get to share with you today, which is the first one we completed, our accessibility checklist. We said 1-ish page because at first we're like, oh, it could be 1 page. And then as we started creating it, we're like, no, you cannot fit accessibility onto 1 page. So it came out to 2 pages. So that's our first initiative that we actually just recently completed, is an accessibility checklist that can be used for all student-facing content, but also even anything we create in-house, because we want to also make sure that the employees here and the staff here have accessibility. So anything that is instructor or student-facing. We're also looking to create a checklist to make sure that the tools, the third-party tools that we implement into our courses, are accessible. Sara and I even were just recently reviewing some of the tools that we have approved in the past, and they aren't fully accessible. So going back and even looking at those and figuring out, have they been upgraded or do we need to find a replacement? We're also looking at investigating user testing. So having students with various disabilities actually look at our courses and provide guidance on them. What do they see? Where could we improve? What are we lacking? But also, what are we doing well, so that we can make sure that that's repeated in other courses? Because we don't want to just focus on what's missing, but what are we doing that we should continue doing? Our next initiative is to create an instructor-specific accessibility professional development. So our Center for Teaching and Learning, they do have required courses that faculty are supposed to take, but we'd also like to make sure that accessibility is a key part of that. So we want to create a professional development specifically on accessibility for our instructors. And then some of our long-term goals are focusing on possibly creating a position that just is accessibility focused. So that would be their role. They are an expert, if you will, on accessibility, and can look at all of our courses, all of our tools, all of our assets, and making sure that they follow this checklist, but also from the ground up, making sure that everything is accessible. And then we're also looking at, there was also a note on there about this, on the Padlet, about student created videos having captions enabled and transcripts. One of the biggest issues is that we want students to have a more humanistic approach, and that might include video in discussions or video in assignments. But when you're sharing peer-to-peer, not most of the time, those are not going to include captions, even though they can be auto captioned now, students still don't necessarily do it. And then there's almost always never caption or transcripts. So how can we make sure that that's something that is accessible for students? And then finally, implementing an accessibility review for student-facing content created outside of IDD. So we have a lot of things that, a lot of courses or a lot of assets that are provided by other entities within the university. So making sure that those are also accessible, like a student orientation course or an online readiness course, just making sure that those things are also accessible. Because while we might be creating them and students are going to get to our course and be like, yes, thank you. Something they might have seen before, not so much. So those are the initiatives that we're working on, but drum roll please, for our amazing accessibility checklist. So how did we do this? Essentially, we all got together and we were assigned different items to look at because we wanted to draw from a lot of different places to make sure that we covered everything that might be necessary in our courses. And so that was looking at Quality Matters General Standard 8. That was looking at our own production guides and style guides. Our university has its own web policy. So looking at those guidance, that guidance, looking at our media guidance, because we do have a media team. So what do they already have in place? Also, Canvas has their own guidelines. For example, they like to keep alt text to 120 characters or less, whereas some other entities, their guidance is not the same. And then looking at other institutions, what are they doing? So a lot of institutions have public facing websites where they provide accessibility guidelines. So we went through those as well, because maybe that could help us a little bit. And so we took all of that guidance, put it together and created a huge document. And then we went through and condensed it, and anything that was duplicated, we omitted it. And then we put it in context for our courses, because it is important to think about how we create our courses. And so some things are a little bit different. And so we wanted to make sure that everything followed our guidelines as well. And so in that case, we created what is known as the accessibility checklist, which I'm going to share with you all. Sarah, can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Both from an accessibility standpoint, but also just a logistical standpoint. I'll make it a little bit bigger. But so as I said, this is 2 pages. And so it is a checklist broken down into basically groups of content. So you can see the first one is text. So all of our explicit instructions regarding making sure that text is accessible. So for example, acronyms are spelled out for the first time. There is adequate color contrast for the text. And then also we do have our Center for Teaching and Learning has its own website for instructors. So we've linked to that for more information so that they have that at their disposal. And then we cover images. That's a huge part of accessibility because we include images in our courses. But also making sure that those images do not take away from the learning. We don't want there to be a cognitive overload, but also if we're including images, why are we including them? So making sure that the alt text is context specific. So just because we have a picture of a plane in a course doesn't mean it's the same plane for every course. Is it a sustainability course? It might have a different purpose. We have some communications courses like a visual design. So the purpose of that plane might be a little different. So making sure that it's we've provided context for our learners. We also have hyperlinks. We link out to a lot of different resources, be it government resources or research articles. So we want to make sure that those are also accessible. You'll also notice that we have provided essentially a resource. Where did we get this? So that everybody who's using the checklist understands that it's not just things that we made up for fun, and that they are grounded in research. And so a lot of the QM standards are linked here or provided as resources. We also go over course navigation, which is very important because our courses are in an LMS. And so students do have to be able to navigate through those courses pretty fluidly and not get lost. Lists and equations. We do have a huge math and engineering department. So equations are part of our lives, sadly, because they take a lot of time, but that's a huge part of our checklist. And then also video and audio, and then finally tables, and then basic design elements and third-party tools, because we do want to make sure that everything we included in our course is accessible. So this is the checklist that we have recently shared with our entire division, and they will be using this as they want not only review courses, but prepare courses or prepare any asset that's being done. So they can use this from the beginning. And it's not just something that we'll step in later and be like, hey, you forgot alt text. But as they're actually designing it, they'll be like, oh yeah, I need alt text here. Or I need to make sure that I don't have a lot of distracting colors or instructions that aren't consistent, because we don't want that cognitive overload to be too high. So plain language is used a lot. So yeah, this is our checklist, and I guess, do you all have any questions, or do you just want to applaud us and be like, wow, thank you for solving all of our accessibility problems in one foul swoop?
Or both.
I mean, yeah.
They did have a couple of questions in here about asking for the checklist. So I know we were going to make it available, but I don't see a way to add an attachment. So we might need to upload it into
I can add a file.
files. You can? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I can add a file, but it's from, give me 1 second. I'll upload that.
And I'll share our contact information again, just in case you do have issues accessing it at some point, or you would like it again. Feel free to email us if you want to talk about this a little bit more. Again, as we mentioned, we're not the experts, but it is a topic that we're really passionate about. So we like to talk about it. And we're happy to share a little bit more about what we did. But I know we have just a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any quick questions for us, otherwise, again, feel free to send us an email.
I would like to note that if you're going to use this, like I said, we have an image of a plane, and it is very content specific for an aeronautical university. So if you might want to switch out the alt text part of it, because it might not be the same for you all. But give me 2 seconds and I'll.
Well, Stephanie, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your experience with our other participants. I'm sure, you know, we all learn best from each other. So I'm sure everyone appreciates all of your insight and your experience and what you've learned. So we appreciate that very much. So please fill out the session evaluations. They're in the attendee hub. And then we also encourage you to fill out the overall conference assessment as well, and that's also available in the attendee hub, and that helps us improve and make the next one even better. So thank you very much for attending and taking the time to be here. We look forward to seeing you all in the next sessions. And we do still have a couple of minutes here. If somebody has a last minute question, we have 2 minutes.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna try and share it. The problem was I couldn't share it from our one section.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just need a minute.
Sure, no problem.
And if not, we can upload it into, I think, the presentation files.
Yes, you should be able to do that.
We should probably just go that route, because sharing it from OneDrive is not going to work, because I can't share outside of Embry-Riddle.
Yes. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. And Stephanie, Jolie shared a list from another institution that might be helpful for us to go over in a future meeting.
Amazing. Oh yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much for hosting our session today.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate you being here.
Very smooth.
Really do. You are what makes these things happen.
Oh, well, thank you.
So have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.